Hello everyone, and thanks for clicking on this video. Today I'm going to be ranking every single hobby to ever exist. Now obviously that's a dramatization. I'm not going to be ranking every hobby, but I'm going to be ranking hobby categories, and I'm going to be ranking them on this tier list that I made. Now before we start ranking the hobbies, I did create kind of like a rubric on how I'm going to be ranking them. Number one is going to be cost. So if there's like a really big startup cost to the hobby, if it's expensive to maintain over time. Next is learning curve. So how difficult the hobby is initially, how easy it is to learn, the time commitment. So is this a hobby that you can quickly start and stop? Is this something you need to commit like several hours in the day to, in the week to? And then accessibility. So like realistically, can anyone and everyone do this hobby? Things I won't be taking into consideration are whether the hobby is social or not. I think solitary hobbies are perfect in their own way as well as social ones, so I won't be considering that. If you can make money from the hobby, I am not a proponent of, monetizing everything that you're good at, so we won't be looking at that. And I won't be looking at whether the hobby is like a useful skill, because a hobby doesn't necessarily need to be useful to the world. It just has to bring you enjoyment. Now, hobbies are like the current trend, which is kind of crazy to say. I feel like this this world we live in, it's like why are hobbies trending? Obviously, I'm happy that people are wanting to step away from their phones and social media and things like that. But at the same time, I'm seeing a lot of people just like try a lot of stuff and then not actually like maintain a hobby. So hopefully this video will be helpful in that. Maybe this is going to give you some ideas on like something you could actually start. Either way, let's get right into the video. So I have my tier list here, and again, I have categorized these hobbies because there's no way I'm gonna like cover every single one. Obviously it's S through F. So S is like, oh my gosh, amazing, this is a hobby that literally anyone can do, it's like super great. F is like, why would you even do this? But anyway, let's get started. So first I have like crafting type hobbies. So very first is drawing. Now drawing, I feel like was my very first hobby. I'm one of those people that's been drawing since they were like, I don't know, 4. And as an adult, I still draw, but I feel like drawing is one of those hobbies that can really suck the life out of you, especially if you do decide to make it a career in the future. That's a whole other discussion. So for drawing, it's very accessible and it's not very expensive if you're just drawing pencil on paper, pen on paper. This can include digital drawing, but I feel like even digital drawing nowadays has become so accessible. There's so many online drawing platforms and softwares you can use that are free. So for that, I think I'm gonna put drawing in A tier. Honestly, yeah, I did it. Yeah. The learning curve, it's high, but it's not that high. And like, if you're drawing really just for the fun of it, it's pretty fun. You can just pull up a tutorial on how to draw your favorite Disney character and then just do that. And I feel like you'd have a fun time doing it. Painting, on the other hand, now painting is expensive. Paint is quite expensive. You have to spend money on canvases. I feel like you need to have space in your area to paint. But at the same time, you can go to like workshops and things like that, but those are expensive too. So I'm going to put painting in C or B. I don't know. I think I'm gonna put it in C tier. I know, I'm sorry. Now this is where my bias is coming into play. Next, I have like fiber arts. So this includes crocheting, knitting, embroidery, cross stitching, etc. Now I know you're gonna be like, but Mila, knitting and crocheting aren't the same. I know they're not the same, okay? But like when you think about it, they have the same attributes. Like you have to buy some kind of like needle or hook. You need some kind of yarn. You need to, practice a decent amount in the beginning to get the hang of it, like if you've never done it before. But I feel like anyone can learn how to crochet and knit and embroider and cross stitch and all those things. So like barrier to entry wise, I wouldn't say it's very high. Like crochet crochet hooks and needles are quite inexpensive, and so is yarn. But I feel like at the same time, it can very quickly turn into like an addiction where you just overconsume and buy yarn for the sake of buying it, but never make projects, or you start projects and you never finish them. So for that, I think I'm gonna put fiber arts in B. Now, again, I'm like quite biased. I love knitting and crocheting, so it's a miracle that I didn't put it in S tier, but I think B is fair. I think B is fair. Next, I have sewing. Now, you could say, well, sewing, that's like fiber arts, so why wouldn't you put it with crocheting and knitting? The reason is because to sew, I'm talking about like sewing with a sewing machine. And you know what? On that front, let's just say like anything craft-wise that requires a large piece of equipment. So like pottery, if you're using a pottery wheel, sewing, I would almost put in the same category. Now, sewing and pottery in both those senses are great because you can make things that you'd use in your daily life. Like you can make clothes. If you learn how to sew, you can alter your clothes. With pottery, you can literally make dishware and bowls and sets and things like that that you would like actually use. But at the same time, like sewing machines and pottery wheels and things like that are expensive. They do take up space. Like you do need a certain amount of space to use them. Fabric and clay are expensive. So honestly, sometimes I feel like buying a certain amount of fabric to like make a dress is as expensive as just buying a dress, which kind of sucks because that shows you like how bad fast fashion is these days. So I feel like for that, I'm gonna put sewing in C tier because it does have a higher barrier of entry. It is a little more expensive. Not everyone can do it in comparison to like drawing and crocheting and things like that. Next, I have general DIY crafts. So this is like scrapbooking, paper crafts. I know like junk journaling is really popular. I think that's like a fun activity. Now, I think the barrier of entry to this is like very minimal. You can buy craft supplies at the dollar store, and trust me, I've been to the dollar store recently and they have amazing craft supplies there. I was like, I'm sorry, dollar store, I did not know your game. This is like amazing. And I think crafts, in terms of the learning curve, I feel like it's minimal because like you just need to make something you personally thinks looks nice. Now, I think crafts, although it's inexpensive, it can lead to like clutter. So if you're not an organized person, crafting could be like a pretty difficult thing for you. You can very easily get into like overconsumption and stuff like that. But if you just have like one scrapbook, a few pieces of stationery that you really like, and every now and then you just sit down, you listen to like some music or you watch a show and you scrapbook, I'm sorry, I think that's kind of S tier. Next is photography. So this can include digital photography with professional cameras, film photography if you're into that. But like, let's be real, you can just use your phone and enjoy photography. So I feel like with that, the barrier to entry like isn't very high. But at the same time, if it's like a hobby, you probably would want to like eventually get a nice camera and things like that, and those can be very expensive. It's also like not something you can just do willy-nilly. Like I haven't really been talking about like how easy this hobby is to like start and stop. So for like crafting and drawing and crocheting and all these things, it's pretty easy to just like pick up something, do it for like an hour and then stop. But with photography, like does that mean that you need to specifically like set up activities or things to do to go and photograph? Or do you need to be like, you know what, I'm gonna like go to this location and take some photos? I don't know, I'm not a photographer, so I feel like the time allocation of photography is quite high. So I think I'm gonna put photography in like C tier. I don't think it's as like accessible as the other things, and I think it might be more time consuming than just like simple crafts. Next is gaming. Now, I don't know how to feel about gaming. I wouldn't classify myself as a gamer. Yeah, I know, it's kind of crazy. There's just such a like wide range of games. So if you are just like a cozy gamer, I feel like that's very different to like if you play Valorant or something like that, you know? Versus if you just play games by yourself, I feel like that's very different to playing games with your friends versus playing games like competitively. So it's such a wide hobby, but I think that's a good thing because that means like pretty much anyone and everyone can find something that they like. Now, obviously you need need a console. So consoles, that's like an expensive thing you need to get. You also need to purchase the game itself. I guess you don't need a console if you can just game on like a computer, but that's something to consider too. And games aren't that expensive. You can buy games on things like Steam, for example, and that can be pretty cheap, especially anytime Steam has those like crazy sales. Gaming is also like pretty easy to pick up and put down unless you like become an addict. So I wouldn't say it's like the most time consuming, but obviously it can suck up your time. So I think I'm gonna put gaming, I don't know, I think I'm gonna put it in B tier because I think the gaming community can be pretty like not great, especially towards like women, you know? At the same time, I don't know, I feel like really biased putting crafts and drawing above it, but this is my tier list, okay? I'm not gonna feel bad. I'm gonna put gaming in B tier. Similar to gaming, I actually have tabletop games. Now, to play tabletop games, you kind of need to be physically with other people. So I think that gives it like a higher barrier of entry because like you need to find people to play with. Buying the tabletop games themselves can be expensive, but you can reuse them and replay them a lot. At the same time though, if you're into something like Warhammer and you like paint figurines and stuff like that, that can be like really time consuming and quite expensive. So I don't know, as someone who's like not super familiar with tabletop games, my like lack of knowledge is coming in here, but I think I'm gonna put it in C tier along with photography and sewing. Actually, can I really put tabletop games with sewing and painting and photography? This could be a D tier moment. Am I just a hater? Maybe I am. I'm sorry. I'm gonna put tabletop games in D tier. You know what? Nah, I am just a hater. I'm gonna put them in C tier. I know, guys, I don't think you've ever seen so much self-awareness like this, but there you go. There you go. That was quite stressful. Moving on, I have collecting things as a hobby. So in this image, I have like stamp collection, but really this includes anything like blind boxes. I see you people with your Smiskies and your Sylvanian families collecting. I personally collect Littlest Pet Shop. Yeah, I have like all my old toys from when I was like 7 and I still collect them. So I am guilty of this. When I think about collecting, I feel like it's a hobby, you know, the barrier to entry, like there's no learning curve. You don't need to learn how to collect things. So boom, that's 0. Time consuming, I wouldn't say it's the most time consuming. So that's boom, 0. Expensive, collecting things can become quite expensive. And I feel like if you really get into it, it can become quite like a dangerous hobby. I feel like it's kind of similar to gambling in the sense that if you're really into like gacha and things like that, that can be pretty bad. And at the end of the day, it is quite a consumerist hobby. Like it runs on you consuming things. And it's really gonna hurt me to say this, but I think I'm gonna put it in F tier. Now, just because a hobby is an F tier doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. At the end of the day, if you have a hobby at all, that's great. If it brings you happiness and without like hurting you or the others around you, that's great. Moving on, I'm gonna go with acting. Now, acting, I think should include things like improv, acting in plays and things like that, musicals, stuff like that. So that's why I just have this like person on a stage. I feel like if you're into like dancing as a form of acting too, I feel like the learning curve for acting is quite high. If you're not like innately, I don't know, for example, like funny or very like extroverted or know how to like act, or if you literally have stage fright or are like nervous around people, that can be a pretty hard or difficult barrier to entry. Price wise, I wouldn't say it's very expensive. I don't know if it's expensive to join an improv group. I don't know. Time consuming, I feel like it would be like not the most time consuming if you maybe just meet with like a group once a week. If you have a show by the end of like the month, then you probably rehearse a little more, so that would be a little time consuming. And like accessibility wise, I wouldn't say that necessarily like anyone could do it, because what if you just live somewhere that doesn't have an acting troupe? I feel like I'm gonna put acting in D tier, and I'm finally gonna change my mind and put tabletop games in D tier too. I'm sorry, I did it, but that just feels right to me. That feels correct. Kind of similar to acting, but not really. I have musical hobbies. So this includes anything where you need to like purchase an instrument. So piano, guitar, violin, cello. Why am I just listing like string instruments? The drums, trumpet, saxophone, whatever. Because like obviously you can make music without instruments using a music program, but for now let's just say like you're using an instrument. Now the barrier to entry of this is quite high. Instruments are expensive. Now of course these days it's more accessible than it's ever been. You can buy like a decent quality keyboard, guitar, whatever for like not a very high price. But if you want to like get into lessons, that's quite expensive. So for that, I think I'm gonna put guitar and, you know, musical hobbies in general, I'm gonna put them in C tier. I feel like learning an instrument, actually I'm gonna put them in D tier. I know, don't come for me, I'm sorry. But when I look at the things I have in C tier, I feel like they are way more accessible than the things I have in D tier versus like the things I have in B, A, and S. So I think that just makes like most sense to me. Like musical instruments are just, they're expensive. And then to learn them still, like that's gonna take a lot of time. So yeah, D tier. Next, I have fashion. I'm gonna say fashion and beauty are like in a similar realm. So if you're like into fashion, so thrifting, you're into like specific fashion brands to the point where like it's a hobby, right? Like you're actively in the fashion sphere or the beauty sphere, like you're actively doing your makeup, not just because you want to look nice, but because it's like something you enjoy doing. Now, fashion as like a hobby, I feel like there comes like a lot of baggage with that. Like the trend cycles these days are kind of crazy. I know there's a lot of discussions about personal style and things like that. Fashion, in that sense, has kind of a difficult barrier to entry. Like, it's not the most expensive because you can thrift, and that's not very expensive. And I think most people don't necessarily want to be fashionable, but they do want to just like have a personal style. And I don't think having a personal style is the same as saying like fashion is your straight up hobby. So for that, I think I'm gonna put it in C tier, like along with painting and sewing and things like that. Next I have writing. So writing, this includes, you know, journaling and stuff like that, but also like blog posting. I feel like blogs have become really popular again, and like I notice people having like email lists and stuff again. Now people use stuff like Substack and Medium and stuff to just like talk about their interests or talk about something that they're passionate about or an issue in the world that they want to discuss. So for that, I think like writing is kind of great. Like the barrier to entry, 0. You don't need to spend any money to blog. Guys, like Tumblr, the blogging days of Tumblr, I'm glad they're returning in like a more mainstream way. I'd say it's kind of a high time commitment. It does take a long time to like write something that's actually good and enjoyable to read, but you can also just be doing it for yourself. Like you can just write in a journal for yourself. So I think I'm gonna put writing in like A tier along with drawing, because you know you're creating something, very low barrier to entry, anyone can do it. Yeah, A tier, very solid hobby. A similar vein to writing, I have reading. So this could be reading anything, books, articles, journals, whatever. And again, similar to writing and drawing, very low barrier to entry, pretty much no learning curve. Like as long as you know how to read, you can just read whatever you want. And sometimes you can read like less difficult texts, and sometimes you can read more difficult texts. Also, if you're a really big reader, that's just like a net positive. You can learn about so many topics, you can formulate new opinions. That can improve like your critical thinking skills. I honestly might put reading above drawing. At the same time, books like can be expensive. If you're really into reading like articles, then article subscriptions can be expensive. So if you want to like read the New York Times and the Atlantic and the Economist and the Washington Post and like all these things consistently, then you need to like pay a subscription for all those things. I don't know. Because of that, I think I'm gonna put reading in A tier. I don't know, but crafts are kind of expensive too. My bias is really showing, like the fact that I have crafts in S tier here. Next, I have running. Now, the picture is of someone running, but I think this is a good category for general single person sports that don't require equipment. So that includes running, but also like yoga, hiking, dance, if you're just like watching a video of someone dancing and following along, stuff like that. Like something you don't really need to go to a class for. It's free as long as like you're able-bodied and just like you can do it yourself. And for that, I think I'm gonna put it in S tier. Again, I'm not just talking about running, I'm talking about like any physical activity that you can do by yourself that costs no money. So I feel like that's just great. No barrier to entry, no learning curve. Like as long as you're not trying to become an Olympic runner or even like a marathon runner. I know running can like really get crazy as a hobby. Like there's that meme about being in your 30s and suddenly wanting to run a marathon. And I know that people are also like going to run clubs instead of dating because they want to meet people that way. That's a tangent in and of itself, but overall, I think it's a good thing. Like it's important to move your body. It's important to go outside, touch some grass. And again, barrier to entry is like almost zero. So S tier. Next, I have sports that require some equipment like a space or whatever, and you need to do it with at least another person. So I have a picture of like someone playing pickleball, but this includes like tennis, pickleball, ping pong, badminton, really those racket sports. So not only do you need the equipment of like the racket and things like that, but you need the physical space. So I feel like these can be expensive depending on where you are playing these games. If you're playing them at like club that you're paying for, so like if you're paying a membership for like something like the YMCA or something like that, then it can be expensive in that sense. But if you're just going to like a public park that also happens to have tennis courts and like racket courts and things like that, then really inexpensive. The thing is that you do need other people to do this hobby, which, you know, can be a good thing because you're spending time with others, but that does like heighten the barrier to entry a little bit, and you're moving your body and you're spending time outside and things like that. So for that, I think, I don't know if I want to put it, I'm gonna put it in B tier for now. And then still in the sports realm, the next category is team sports. So these are sports where, again, you need a space to play in, but you also need like a whole team. So this includes volleyball, soccer, football, ultimate frisbee, stuff like that. I think these are even more inaccessible than racket sports because you need to join a team. And if you're not in a college or high school setting, that can be really difficult. I looked at like the local casual teams in my area, and like there are none for people that are straight up beginners at the sport too. Most of them are for people that are like have been playing these sports in like high school or college, and they're like not professionals, but they're not bad at the sport either. So I feel like that's a pretty high barrier to entry too, because like if you just want to play a team sport but you're not like good at the sport but you just want to play it, then that can be really hard, because then you need to find people that are somewhat in your skill level or like maybe a little better or a little worse than you. So I think I'm gonna keep like racket sports in B tier, and I'm gonna put team sports in D tier low-key, because I feel like they can be expensive too. Like I was looking at again the local sports that I can do in my area, and I also like need to pay to be in these teams, because I assume like you're paying for like, you know, the space that you're going to be in, and you're paying for like any possible tournaments that you might go to. But like, what if I just want to play a team sport without like the commitment of being competitive? You know, like what if I just want to play volleyball with some strangers? I feel like that doesn't really seem to be an option. So I'm going to put it in D tier, because like this is literally a hobby that I've tried to have, and like the barrier to entry seems to be quite high, which kind of sucks. Still in the sports realm, next is sports that you need large equipment to do, or like you need to have a membership to do this sport. So this includes like, I have a picture of cycling, so like you need a bicycle in order to cycle, whether you're renting one or you own one. This includes stuff like surfing, bouldering, like you need a membership in order to boulder or I guess you could boulder outside, but that's kind of scary for a beginner. I wouldn't say the barrier to entry to these is very high, and I wouldn't say the learning curve for these is quite high either. Like if you just like swimming, then you can just swim. You can like pay a membership for a gym or like again the YMCA or something, and then just swim a couple laps every now and then, and it can be fun. The thing I like about these sports is like you can do them with people or you can choose to not do them with people, but they can be quite expensive. Like if you decide to buy a bike, that can be pretty expensive. If you decide to buy a surfboard, that can be expensive. Also, like if you don't live by the beach, how are you going to do that? If you don't live in like a walkable area, most of the US, how are you going to bike? Like you need to go to designated areas to do that too. Maybe the closest gym to you is like half an hour away, and then boom, you need to like drive half an hour every day just to go to the gym. Again, the barrier to entry to these is quite high. I wouldn't say it's as high as team sports, so I'm gonna put it in C tier along with these other hobbies. I feel like that's fair. I have a few miscellaneous things that I didn't know what to put in each category. So first one is gardening. I love the idea of gardening, but I've never been able to do it correctly. I feel like the learning curve can be quite high, and it's quite a high time commitment because you can garden and then all your plants can die, and then it's like, oh my gosh, that was a waste of time. In that sense, I feel like gardening can be kind of difficult and frustrating, but I'm sure it's also very rewarding because then you can have your own herb garden, you can have your own like fruits and vegetables, but it's also not the most accessible because you need space in order to do that, and not everyone lives in an area that has like a community garden. So I'm gonna put it in C tier because I think it's more accessible than these sports, but definitely less accessible than these. Next I have cosplaying. I feel like that's pretty niche, but I just wanted to add it anyway. It's nice because like, you know, you get to join this like really nice community of people. I've never met like a rude cosplayer. I feel like they're all very nice people, but very expensive to cosplay. It doesn't need to be expensive, but I feel like there's a high barrier to entry in that sense. And like with cosplay, if you're not purchasing items that are ready to go, then you're making them, and like there's a barrier to entry in that sense because you need to like make your costumes. But it is expensive in the sense that like if you're trying to cosplay and then go to a convention, then going to conventions is quite expensive. So I think I'm gonna put cosplaying in F tier. I'm sorry to all the cosplayers out there, as well as all the collectors out there. No hate, I think cosplaying is really cool, but as a hobby, not the easiest to get into, I'd say. Next, I also have traveling. I didn't know like what category to put this in. Now, again, traveling, depending on where you live, can be pretty accessible. If you live somewhere like Europe, then I feel like is pretty easy to get from like country to country using public transportation or trains or things like that. Whereas if you live in the US, traveling can be quite difficult. Within the US, it's not so bad. You can like just drive and take road trips, which is nice, but going to other countries would be difficult. It can also be expensive. It can also be really cheap, but it does require a lot of research. So I think I'm gonna put traveling in D tier. I feel like that's fair considering the other things I'm putting it with. Next, I have like food related hobbies. So first one is drinking. I have alcoholic drinks in the image, but this can be anything. Like it can be like coffee or tea, or you know, like maybe you're just really into like mixology and like making fun drinks. I feel like that's fun. It's not like too expensive. It's the price of like the materials you use. Obviously, if that's like alcohol, that's gonna be pretty expensive. But if you're just into making really good tea, then it wouldn't be that expensive, and you know, you're consuming something that you like. Again, it's something that you can share with other people, and just like any hobby, you can get like really into it and spend a lot of money on it, but then you don't need to do that, and it could just be like more of a casual hobby, like, you know, coffee and like making lattes and learning how to make latte art. So I feel like in that sense, I'm gonna put it in B tier. I think it's a little more accessible than the things below it. Next, I have cooking. And again, like with cooking, it's the price of the materials that you're using. And although there's a high like barrier to entry in the sense that like you need to purchase like nice cooking supplies, so like, I don't know, stainless steel pots and pans and things like that, at the same time you don't really need to, because you can get into cooking and make like really great dishes without spending a lot of money. Now, cooking is like time consuming. There's also like dishes at the end of the day when you cook, so that's an aspect. But I think I would put it in B tier as well. It's not as accessible and easy to get into as like drawing, writing, or reading and all these things, but it is like a little easier and the learning curve isn't as high as like some of these other things. In a similar realm, I have baking. Again, baking, like not a very high barrier to entry. You just need to purchase one stand mixer or something. You don't even need to do that. You can use like a hand mixer. I don't know. I feel like baking is harder than cooking, but I think the barrier to entry to baking is smaller than cooking because I think baking is cheaper. Like objectively, stuff like flour and like sugar and butter and things like that are cheaper than buying like fancy cuts of meat and vegetables and stuff. So for that, I think I'm actually going to put baking in A tier. Maybe this is my bias showing. I'm sure you could easily justify putting cooking in A and baking in B. But I could just put baking in B for baking, you know? Nah, I'm gonna keep it in A tier. Next I have like no, I wouldn't say these are necessarily crafts, but I guess like crafting hobbies that require a lot of equipment. So this isn't just your basic like DIY craft. This is like woodworking, welding, things like that. So cost, expensive, barrier to entry, high, learning curve I feel like is high, time consuming, yes, extremely time consuming, but these hobbies are like really cool. Like if I knew someone who was into glass blowing or woodworking, amazing, but like let's be real, the accessibility to these, it's really low. If you don't have like a garage, that already limits you because then that means you need to go to like a center where you can do all that stuff. Yeah, at the end of the day you can make something that like you use every day, or you can make something that you're very happy with, but your average Joe isn't doing woodworking and welding and stuff like that. But at the same time, these are like objectively cool hobbies. Like a part of me just wants to put welding in S tier because that's so cool, but let's be real, I'm gonna put it in F. I'm gonna put welding and woodworking in F tier. I'm sorry. Okay, we're almost done with this video. Next is I have learning languages. I feel like learning languages is one of those hobbies that's like, are you really a polyglot, or do you just know like a few phrases and sentences in a language? You know what I mean? Like I feel like I've seen so many videos about people who like say they're polyglots and then they're exposed later and it's like, dang, that kind of sucks. But at the same time, I feel like it's a pretty fun activity. I feel like it kind of goes hand in hand with traveling. Like if you're learning all these languages, isn't the point to kind of go to the country where they speak those languages? So I don't know, the barrier to entry to this isn't very high. You can learn languages online without taking any classes. But if you do decide to like travel to go to the country where they speak that language, or if you do decide to take classes, it can be kind of expensive from that end. The learning curve, I'd say, is kind of high. Like let's be real, if you're learning a language to the point where you want to become like fluent or an expert, that's gonna take some time. But I assume it's probably quite fun. Again, it's an activity that you can do with people or without people. So I'm gonna put learning language in B tier. I feel like it's fun and it's pretty chill, I'd say. Next I have like consuming media. Now this is quite general, but I mean people who watch movies as a hobby, or TV shows, or like anime or cartoons or anything like that. Like the hobby is based off of you consuming content. If we're looking at it objectively using the criteria that I had mentioned, the barrier to entry is not very high. Anyone can watch a movie, anyone can like analyze movies, review them, give their opinions on them, become a cinemaphile, if you will. I don't know what they're called, which I think is great. But then at the same time, I don't know what category I want to put this in, because I feel like if you're into movies and things like that, it's kind of similar to like gaming. So honestly, I think I'm gonna put it like next to gaming, because I feel like it's like similar. Like you're looking at a screen and stuff like that, which I don't think is objectively a bad thing. And it's not like the most time consuming, but it can become like addictive and things like that, kind of similar to gaming. So I feel like it's fair to put them in the same category. And that's kind of like it. Next I have like these last 3 hobbies, but I kind of put them in here for like shits and giggles. I have stock trading. I feel like stock trading is gambling and you can't tell me otherwise, and for that I'm gonna put it in F tier. I don't know, I feel like at the end of the day you're trading stocks to like make money, which if the aim of your hobby is to make money from it, then it's not a hobby anymore. I feel like that means it's a side hustle, you know? And I don't think those are the same thing. Actually, I think I'm just gonna put a lower category below F and say side hustle. And I'm gonna put trading stocks in there because I feel like it's just like, is it really a hobby? Like, people who say stock trading is their hobby, it's like, do I want those people to be my friends? I don't know. I'm sorry. Maybe I just like really roasted a ton of people out there, but it's true. It's true. Next, I have trolling. Now, I don't know why I put this in here. Again, I was worried I wouldn't have anything to put in F tier. I feel like trolling is a hobby. Like, is that just me? I feel like there are people who are like actively negative on the internet because it's fun for them. This includes like content farming and like rage bait and stuff like that. Like, I feel like people actively do things like rage bait and trolling because it's fun. And I think that's kind of a side hustle too, because like I have a feeling people who do that make money from it, because I feel like if you post rage bait and enough people engage with it, then you're gonna make a little bit of money from that. So I don't know, I'm gonna put trolling. I just can't justify putting trolling alongside like cosplaying and collecting things, so I'm gonna say it's a side hustle. I feel like it is. Lastly, I have content creation. Now, content creation, it's a hit or miss. Like, sometimes you just want to make fun, silly little videos for like you and your friends, but I feel like these days, who is creating content without the idea of like hopefully making it their job one day, you know? Like, let's be real, I like making YouTube videos, and right now I don't make any money from them, so kind of like it is a hobby for me. But if someone was like, hey, do you want to be a YouTuber and make this your full-time job, I wouldn't say no. Like, let's be real. So for that, I'm also gonna put it in the side hustle category. I think that's fair. So looking at this list, I'm feeling like a little conflicted. Some of these things I'm like, oh, did I like rank these fairly? Like, I'm thinking like, should I have put fashion in C tier? Like, maybe it's a D tier thing, maybe it's like a low C tier, I don't know. But I feel like this is fair. Do you guys think this is fair? I don't know. Like, again, if we're looking at it just by like the cost, the learning curve, the time commitment, and the accessibility, I feel like these make sense. Because like, again, if you look at the hobbies in like S and A tier, although they seem like solitary hobbies, they're all things like you could do with other people. And I feel like that's like a really big thing too. And then if you look at the hobbies in F tier, I don't know, I feel like the accessibility of them is like lower. I don't know. I feel like I'm happy with this. Let me know what you think. Feel free to argue in the comments below. Let's create some discussion. I feel like this is gonna be a really long video, so if you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. And yeah, let me know what your favorite hobbies are. Let me know what you think, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because it really helps me out and the channel out a lot too. And yeah, I guess I'll see you in the next one. Bye.